This is LBC. Call Clegg. Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg takes your calls with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. This is Call Clegg on LBC.
It's 9 o'clock on Thursday the 5th of June. That means it's time for Call Clegg with me, Nick Clegg, here on LBC. So I'm taking your questions for the next half an hour. Do get in touch on 0845 6060 973 or email at nickclegg@lbc.co.uk, and you can watch, of course, on the website lbc.co.uk. So let's go straight to the first caller, who is Adam in Aylesbury. Hello, Adam.
Good morning, Mr. Clegg.
Morning.
I have a question for you about pension reform, which was a big theme in the Queen's speech yesterday.
Yeah.
The ability to spend pension savings freely is very eye-catching, but it totally ignores the problem of saving enough money in the first place. You must know how difficult that is with the economic problems we've got, with interest rates and inflation as they are. I think the problem is that you and other politicians have voted to shield yourselves from those problems. You've granted yourselves a guaranteed retirement, even though you make the big decisions on the economy, the decisions that move everyone else's retirement prospects up or down. To me, it's like a chief executive not wanting shares in the business he runs. And if you and other politicians had to save for your future like everyone else, you'd actually feel the ebb and flow of the economy, the consequences of your own decisions. Surely that would make all of you better at running the economy.
Just, Adam, can you expand a bit about why you think, in a sense, people are not able to kind of get the central point you're making, which is that your ability to save depends on your ability to earn in the first place? Are you referring to something specific, or you're making a more general point?
Is the freedom to go and buy a Lamborghini is irrelevant if I can't save enough to buy one. And my ability to make those savings depends on how well the economy is run.
Yes.
And if the economy is run by people who have opted out of the consequences of their own decisions, who've got a guaranteed retirement because inflation, interest rates, investment returns mean nothing to them, now how can I have any hope?
Sorry, I just want to check that we are going to agree to disagree, because I strongly disagree with this idea that somehow say what you like about the government and the political class, but I don't think you can somehow claim that we haven't tried our damnedest over the last 4 years to fix a deeply damaged British economy and try and instill growth into the economy and instill a sense of optimism and confidence in the future. Most importantly of all, people can save if they're in work and earning money in order to save, and I think it is a extraordinary thing that we have seen, far from all the predictions of 3 million people out of work. We've seen 1.7 million new jobs being created. We've cut taxes, principally because of a Liberal Democrat measure of raising the point at which you pay income tax to £10,000 and beyond, so people keep more of the money in their pocket and then they can save more. So I just don't accept this idea that that we haven't tried very hard indeed, with some significant measure of success, to put the economy on a much surer footing. Without which, of course, you're right, you don't have the confidence to save. I get that.
But what about Adam's idea that perhaps you are in a rather rarefied position in that you're politicians and that you don't necessarily have to make the same sort of payments into a pension pot that perhaps Adam and certainly that I do?
Well, as you know, Steve Webb, the Lib Dem minister responsible for pensions reform, has made huge changes, which many of which are actually seeking to ensure that people have a decent pension in retirement.
But not the sort one might get if you're a politician. I mean, I appreciate you work hard.
No, I'm not saying that. But whether it's the move towards auto enrolment, a hugely important step to ensure that people do save where they can, or whether it's not through necessarily savings you set aside, but simply what you're entitled to get, having retired through the state pension, where we've seen the largest cash increase in the state pension ever because of the Liberal Democrat triple lock guarantee that it increases by a decent amount. So, Adam, I just simply don't accept either on the pension reforms that Steve Webb has pioneered, which are truly radical. They're some of the most radical changes this government has introduced in any area of public policy, or in our attempts to do exactly what you say, which is to create the conditions in which people can save in the first place. I just don't think our record is as bad as you suggest.
Quick response, very quick. One line from you, Adam, to the Deputy Prime Minister.
You're saying it's great news from inside a gated community.
Well, Adam, look, I know it's the easiest thing in life these days to say, "Oh, well, you politicians, you have absolutely no idea." You know, politicians. Let me break some news here. Politicians are actually human beings. They are made of flesh and blood, and I find a lot of politicians, of all parties, by the way, I'm not making a party political point here, are very, very, very assiduous at working in and for and on behalf of the communities they represent. Week in, week out, MPs go out there much, much more than many people I know in business, frankly, and go out there and talk, if you like, spend time with, help, go and visit, spend time in the living rooms, go and visit the schools of their, how can I put it, of their customers. Now, I know the political class is deeply unpopular. I get that. There's a huge amount of public anger and frustration about politics. Boy, do I know Westminster and Whitehall needs reforming. The longer I've been there, the more anti-establishment I've become, because I wish it was. I've tried my best, but I wish it was more reformed. But I really wouldn't, Adam, if I could just gently suggest, sort of breezily declare that anyone who's in politics somehow suddenly isn't a member of the human race. That simply isn't the case.
Adam, thank you. Shall we move on, Deputy Prime Minister?
Urge, is it Urge in Maidstone?
Yes. Hello, Mr. Clegg.
Hello.
Good morning. I was having a conversation. I dialed into Nick's programme yesterday, and it was essentially in lines with all the havoc that's been going on with the Birmingham school system.
Yes.
And this led to me asking a question, essentially, of what I mean, Ofsted had warnings from before as well.
Had what? Sorry, the line's a bit funny.
Warnings from Ofsted.
Warnings from 4 years ago, apparently, as well. So what assurances is the government putting in place for someone like me or any other? It doesn't have to be, I'm a practicing Muslim, but any mother, I'm a mother of a 3-year-old, she's going to reception. This really takes my, I mean, I don't know if I need to take an Ofsted report seriously next time or not. So what assurances is government going to put in place that something like this won't happen again, where there were warnings from 4 years ago? And the other thing is, has this incident or this highlighted a need for maybe a state-regulated faith school, in your view, as this probably may have prevented such attempted takeovers by any community or any person of any denomination?
Well, that speaks to the whole idea of faith schools, I think, Urge, doesn't it? So there's two aspects for Mr. Clegg to address. Stay on the line. Let's see what he says, Mr. Clegg.
Firstly, I simply cannot, I think, reasonably declare on the nature of those warnings, who provided them, whether they were responded to properly. As you know, there are claims and counterclaims about one of the letters that has come to light, is it authentic or not, until I see what the Ofsted reports say, and indeed the other reports that are going on into these schools in Birmingham. That's precisely why these investigations are being held. But you, as a mum of a 3-year-old going to a school and as a practising Muslim, you have every right to say, well, hang on a minute, how can I make sure that my kid gets an education, doesn't get indoctrination? And there's a big difference between education and indoctrination. And of course, all we want is the former. By the way, in all schools. And of course, do remember in this case, there's a variety of different kinds of schools. So, you know, there are academies and non-academy, community schools and sort of more autonomous schools involved here. So it's clearly not associated with one type of school that appear, you know, where things appear to have gone awry. And I think Urge, you're right to say that there is the Ofsted plays now and will continue to play a particularly important role in inspecting schools to ensure that schools do what they're supposed to do, which is provide a first-rate education, but not to provide, which is the concern here, basically a venue for ideological indoctrination of our children, including your children. So that's what, you know, that we all know what we want. We all know now, I think we're looking, this is now being put under a very exacting magnifying glass in Birmingham. There are frankly going to be question marks not only about what warnings were taken up or not, there are going to be big questions, I suspect, also about the local authority, because the local authority plays a big role in the governance of some of these schools as well, and until I've seen these reports, and I haven't seen any of them yet, Urge, I can't give you a kind of fuller account of what happened there. What I can give you, as a dad myself with 3 children at school, and you're a mum of a little one who's going to go to school soon, is that I want for all children what every single parent wants, which is if slightly regardless of what kind of school they go to, you just want teachers who are dedicated to imparting knowledge and an appetite for learning in a professional way, and not doing so with a particular ideological axe to grind. And by the way, just on, since Nick mentioned it,
faith schools.
Faith schools. My experience is that the vast majority of faith schools are highly effective precisely because they realise they've got to be engines of integration, not silos of isolation. I actually find that quite a lot of faith schools, because they have a faith identity, want to reach out to other faiths. And if I think of some of the faith schools in my constituency in South West Sheffield, they're brilliant. They're some of the most sort of outgoing schools, and they want to educate their
not all
either
like
Catholic.
That, unfortunately.
Well, of course, it would appear in Birmingham that may not be the case, but that is precisely what needs to come to light by way of these reports.
Okay, just thanks, sir. Just on related to this, who started the fight, Gove or May?
I've no idea. I've no idea. And to be honest, look.
How badly do they dislike each other?
I mean, I don't want to sound too sort of pious and lofty about this, but it really is, as Urge's call just demonstrated, where she's concerned about her 3-year-old daughter. It really is, I think, a bit more important than what is said about one minister's attitude towards another. At the end of the day,
can you see it fizzing between the two?
No, I tell you what I see. We discuss these things in something in government called the National Security Council, something which this coalition government set up. David Cameron chairs it. I'm the vice chair.
Yeah.
So we, quite rightly in this government, the two senior people in the government, make sure there was collective discussion where Theresa May and Michael Gove obviously have important contributions to make. The issue at stake here is actually quite, if you just set the personalities aside, is quite, is very serious, but straightforward to describe, but more difficult to tackle. We all know we have laws in place and measures in place to deal with violent extremism, of course. The question is, how do you challenge some of the thinking that can lead to people becoming violent extremists? And that's where the debate is. No one disputes the fact. In fact, that's what's going on in the investigations looking into these schools, that you need to challenge people who peddle ideological forms of extremism. And there, I think, funny enough, I was listening to Hazel Blears on the radio this morning. I think she quite rightly said, look, language about a war on an ideology from an office in Whitehall or draining the swamp. You can't do that from an office in Whitehall. It's people in the communities themselves who are the best antidotes to extremists in those communities. Okay. It isn't politicians in offices in Whitehall who can suddenly declare that they're going to put an end to an ideology they don't like.
I know what listeners enjoy about you is your candid nature. Yes. So when I ask you again, can you see it fizzing between the two of them at the cabinet table?
I'd love to suggest that our meetings in Whitehall are fizzing in any respect. They're often a lot more earnest than that.
But they don't get on, those two, do they?
I think they. Look, ask them. I don't know. Ask them. Look, to be honest, at the end of the day, I want us to. I want us as a government on this really. Do
they sit next to each other?
Nick, I can't recall.
Obviously, there's PM's in the middle, then you're on his left.
No. I sit opposite him. Look, I'm not going to get into the furniture of these meetings. It has no bearing at all on the issue.
You must know which end of the table.
We have little mints in a bowl in the middle of the table. If you think that has any bearing on it. That has about as much bearing on this as whether Michael Gove and Theresa May sit next to each other.
Are they at the same end of the table, or are they kept a table apart?
One bowl of mints at one side, one in the middle.
The Deputy Prime Minister is not for answering
I'm not going to take it.
We move on. This is called Clegg. It's your show. On we go.
Michael in Waltham Abbey.
Good morning, Nick.
Hello, Michael.
Good morning, Nick.
Morning.
Good morning. I watched the, I'll call it a publicity stunt. Mr. Cable sitting in the pub having a pint together, yeah?
Private little pint. No one was watching.
I have to say, I watched it quite carefully.
Oh, right.
And it was the most uncomfortable pint I've ever seen two men have. Your eyes, you couldn't even look at Mr. Cable. He looked like he just didn't want to be there. Oh. My question to you is, look, we're not stupid. We all know what Mr. Cable's done. He's been involved in some underhand tactics. And do you really believe, in your heart of hearts, A, he's innocent, and B, you'll be leader of the Lib Dems in 12 months' time with that sort of antics going on?
On the latter, yes, I do. Obviously, there's a lot of soul-searching going on in my party, quite rightly, and I'll be talking about that in the coming days, about my own thoughts about how we move forward from here, because we had a really, really, really bad set of election results. But
when will you be talking in the coming days then?
You'll be the first to know, Nick. But of course, because I wanted to take some time. For instance, last night we had a long meeting of the Liberal Democrat Parliamentary Party, bringing together all the Lib Dem MPs. There was unanimous backing for my leadership at that meeting, but also an acknowledgement by me and everybody else there that, of course, we've lost a lot of support by going into coalition and taking these difficult decisions, and so, you know, we want to campaign with renewed vigour about the kind of things that we think people perhaps don't know about the great things we've done in government, the service we've tried to provide to the nation, but also the things we want to do in the future. As far as Vince is concerned, actually, Michael, here, I'm going to... It was Nick Ferrari who challenged me months ago and said, why don't you go and have a pint with Sir Vince Cable? So there I go and dutifully do what you tell me, and now Michael rings me up and says... We weren't clear. Well, listen, all I can say to you, Michael, is you try and have a pint with hundreds of people literally tapping on the window pane with their cameras, and sort of make and try and pull that one off effortlessly, as if it was a sort of normal Saturday evening pint down your local. Look, Michael, Vince Cable and I, we worked very well together. I don't believe at all that he was involved in some untoward plot at all. Haven't done so right from the beginning. Clearly, Matthew Oakeshott is a completely different matter. He's now left the party.
What's your view of him?
Matthew Oakeshott? Look, Matthew Oakeshott has always been of the view that we shouldn't be in coalition at all. So his view is that we should just basically cut our losses, pull out altogether, and then he adds to that a fair amount of sort of personal commentary as well about, you know, this. That.
Would you ever have a pint with him, or would you pour it over his head?
Certainly not.
You'd pour it over his head.
Certainly not. I don't think Matthew Oakeshott and I are going to be having a pint in public or private anytime soon. But the point is, I just so fundamentally disagree that what you do when there's real heat on in politics, just as in life, is that you sort of bail out and you buckle. I think the worst thing to do, given how much we have, you know, the sort of sweat and tears that we've spilt in order to prove that we can do the right thing for millions of people up and down the country by cutting taxes, providing better pensions, providing better apprenticeships, better funding for schools and so on. At the last moment. You might not like the list, but it's what I'm proud of, so I'm going to slip it in from time to time. But the last thing you're going to do is just when it gets toughest.
The last thing you finish your pint.
I think I drank most of the pint.
Well, I'm told that Mr. Cable finished his, but you left some.
Well, that is a truly malicious rumour, which I must check on. I'm seeing Vince later in the afternoon. I will check. Are you saying that I can't down a pint like the best of them?
How quickly can I get a pint of Archer's mild ale? Is what you chose, apparently.
Yes.
Why mild ale?
Because the guys behind the bar told me it was one of their favourites.
Oh, I see.
I was asking them what's one of their...
How much would a pint of that cost normally?
I don't know. Probably £4, something like that.
Is that a pint of it? I don't drink it. I must give you this. By the way, the pub landlord in The Guardian.
Yes.
Have you seen this?
No.
We'll show this to your children. Has rated pictures of politicians from Barack Obama, Michael Portillo, Margaret Thatcher.
Al Murray, this.
William Hague. I'm afraid you score bottom rating along with the Prime Minister. But there we are. No. Take that for the kids for later as we move on to the next call.
Opinion polls are bad enough, but this really is the devastating blow.
I'm afraid Al Murray's not in your corner at all. We have no to the next caller.
Norman in Rickmansworth. Hello, Norman.
Good morning.
Morning.
Why did you feel listening to the people means that limited parliamentary time should be given to legislating on plastic bags rather than guaranteeing a referendum in 2017? Surely this would end the need for a protest vote for UKIP and force people and all political parties to address head-on this very real issue at the next general election that everyone wants dealt with.
I totally agree with you, Norman, that we should, and we have legislated for the circumstances in which a referendum will take place.
No, I'm saying pass a bill now.
No, Norman, sorry, can I just answer the question? I know you want me to answer, let me just tell you the facts.
My question,
hold on,
not
Norman,
yours.
let's hear... Let's hear from the Deputy Prime Minister.
Let me tell you the facts. In 2011... we legislated for the first time ever. That's what you're challenging me to do, is to say, why do you not legislate to give people the guarantee of when a referendum will take place? And we did that in 2011. But by the way, both Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, we came together, no government done this before, and we said, do you know what? We accept what people say when they say it shouldn't be up to politicians to decide when there's a referendum. Give us the guarantee in law. And that is what we did. And no government has done that before. Now, the Conservative Party have changed their mind since then. They're perfectly free to do that, but they've changed their mind. So no, actually, we're going to just decide that some arbitrary date in the diary the referendum should be held. Look, I am for a referendum. I've long campaigned in favour of a referendum. When the Lisbon Treaty was ratified, I thought it was appalling that the Tories broke their promise about holding a referendum on that. And in fact, it was my party that stood up and said we must have a referendum when we ratify these treaties, not do them behind the backs of the British people. So I just don't accept your assertion, Norman, that people like me have not been forthright in both arguing for a referendum for many years and legislating for the circumstances in which they'll take place. I agree with you. There's an argument that the Conservatives have now sort of, if you like, changed their views on the timing of it. But I'm perfectly entitled to say, look, just look at what we've done, not what we've said. Look at what we've done. We've legislated to give you the guarantee in law that a referendum will take place the next time these rules change.
Norman, a quick response.
My response is, so then why won't you use the parliamentary time now? You have the power to force the bill before Parliament. You have the power. Use it instead of plastic bags.
I don't think it's an either or. And I just, at first, would just again remind you, we did spend considerable parliamentary time during this Parliament in 2011 doing exactly what you recommend, passing into law the guarantee in which, setting out the circumstances in which a referendum will take place. On plastic bags, this is something that I pushed for more than anyone else in government. There was a great deal of resistance in parts of government. Oh no, it would be unnecessary red tape for businesses and so on. If you look at what's happened in Wales, a charge of 5p and indeed in Ireland, if you look at what happens elsewhere, it has had a fantastic effect in cutting down on the use of these plastic bags that don't degrade quickly at all, that do immense damage to wildlife, and that often a real eyesore to our countryside and the kind of environment we live in. So, and by the way, the money, it's very important to remember because I think this has been forgotten in it, and I certainly insist on this. The money goes directly to good causes. It doesn't go into George Osborne's coffers. It goes to good causes. So I don't think
all
people
the money
should.
Will. Debbie
Yeah,
Brandis.
I don't think it should be. Yes, I mean I'm sure there'll be some. I need to check about exactly what admin charges there might
all
be.
the jobs, people who make these plastic bags, people who sell these plastic bags. What's going to happen to them?
The evidence is that the vast majority of people, and this is, by the way, a very, very rare occasion when there's been a joining of forces between me and the Daily Mail, a unique constellation, which I think was very unlikely to be repeated. Yes, I know. I'm sure they're now suddenly raising doubts about their support for this. But I've delivered this in government, as I say, against a lot of resistance, because I think if you look at what's happened in Wales...
But what about the people who make the things and sell them? What happens to them?
Well, Nick, sorry... Sometimes you just have to take big decisions that having so many plastic bags swirling around our countryside, strangling wildlife, suffocating fish, disfiguring our countryside is something that we don't want as a country, particularly when we can do something about it. People can use recyclable bags more often. Remember, we're not imposing this on the small shops, on the small retailers.
Does it need to be a law, though? Does it actually need to be a law?
A law. I think if you're going to say to the big retailers, look, you've got to do this, you're free to decide,
so
which is what we're
charged. But to make it a law, don't we have enough laws? It's not very liberal.
Why are you so fixated about the law? If you want something to happen, if you want something like this to happen,
well, you nudge. You keep nudging. You don't mandate.
I think there's been plenty of nudging on this. And by the way, as you know, some retailers have introduced these charges in the past. Yes, others haven't. So I think we've said...
Most of them have seen a drop in takings, but there we are.
Well, as I say, if you actually look at what's happened this isn't sort of back of the fag packet stuff, because it's actually happened in other countries, and in Wales in particular, it's been incredibly successful at cutting the amount of I think unnecessary environmental damage from plastic bags swirling around the place.
At the Lib Dem conferences, when you sell goods, how much do you charge for the plastic bags when people take away their mugs and their books?
We have sort of hemp bags most of the time in our conference centre, but I'll get back to you on that one, Nick.
All right, well, am I not surprised? Now, that refers, I should say, to the Queen's speech. Earlier in the show, we spoke with Zach Goldsmith. Of course, this was the idea about how if you wanted to sack your MP, you could, but as you might be aware, Mr. Goldsmith is not convinced by what he heard yesterday. He had this observation for you.
What does he think the voters will do in the weeks or months or years to come when they face another scandal and they learn that the recall powers he has given them have not actually empowered them to hold that MP to account. And that certainly will happen. How does he think that will impact people's voting intentions going forward? What will happen to the level of public rage?
Right. I will say this directly to Zach as well, but I'll say it now on the radio. I've said this to him in the House of Commons. I've talked to him about for months on this. Zach and I are completely at one. I actually have got no objection at all to the kind of radical, what they call Californian-style recall that Zach likes, right? It has absolutely no hope at all of being passed into law because of profound objections from his own Conservative colleagues. I've had to battle day and night to get even this modest recall measure agreed in the Queen's speech against Conservative Party resistance. There is simply no way that his own Conservative Parliamentary Party would ever touch his proposal with a barge pole. So all I would say, if I say it with any frustration, I've been trying to say this for months, is his choice is this. Either you aim for the stars and get nothing because his own party won't support it, or you at least get some kind of recall mechanism onto the statute book. And at the end of the day, an ideological politician who wants to change the world and all the rest of it, but I'm also a practical man. There is simply no way that the kind of revolutionary power of recall that Zach has campaigned on, actually, finally enough, I've got quite a lot of personal sympathy with, would ever make it onto the statute book, not least because of the objections of his own party. So what I've done in government is to say, OK, let's at least get something on the statute book. By the way, completely in line with our coalition agreement commitment to make sure there's a trigger so that people can, so you have a petition in a local area, and if there's 10% of people who then say that they want there to be an election, it happens. And that's what we're now going to try and get. So look, I'd say to Zach, look, first talk to his own party, rather than constantly taking pot shots at my attempts to get something on the statute book, because that's where the resistance has laid for the last several years. And secondly, the choice for Zach and people like that and for reformers is simply and by the way, this is the case in reform more generally. Do you want no reform and be terribly pure and holier than thou about it and have no reform at all, or do you at least want to have some reform on the statute book?
But if it's true that it has to be a committee of MPs that sit above it, I appreciate that you have to get... I hear exactly you have to get a middle ground, but it's not particularly satisfactory.
Let me explain. In the coalition agreement, we said, and I insisted on this, being in the coalition agreement, we said there should... And do you remember, this was in the wake of the MPs' expenses scandals. We said there should be a power of recall so that, crucially, I think the wording said something like, where there has been proven serious wrongdoing, that constituents then have a right. How you prove serious wrongdoing is that is where we've got into kind of hot water with people like Zach. Because Zach basically thinks, I don't really care whether serious wrongdoing is proven or not. People should just be able to assert it. What I think a lot of people are saying is, well, hang on, you've got to have some. You've got to have, prevent it becoming a complete kangaroo court. You have to have some mechanism by which you can prove that serious wrongdoing has taken place, as we said in the coalition agreement. Now, he disagrees with that, fine, but he's got to stop constantly claiming that somehow this is some dastardly dilution of a good idea when his own party have objected to it tooth and nail in government, and I know that more than anyone else. And secondly, if you did what Zach Goldsmith wants, do you know what would happen? Nothing at all. And at the end of the day, me, as a reforming, campaigning politician, I want, in my time in government, to get things done. And they might not be what everything you want. They might not be what all the radicals want, but it's better than doing nothing at all.
A couple of email questions, Deputy Prime Minister. Graham in Bushy, in a recent YouGov opinion poll, you had an approval rating of -65, which is even lower than Gordon Brown at his lowest point. Are you surprised it's only -65?
What a charming question. Look, it's obvious. It's obvious, isn't it? We lost a huge amount of support as a party. And
why are you unpopular?
I don't know. Don't ask me. Ask other people. I think what I do know is that when we went into coalition, and I do get this, of course I get this, there are a sizable number of people. And if you actually look, if you're interested in polls, and I try not to look at them too closely sometimes, but if you actually look, the cliff edge drop in our support actually happened the moment we went into coalition. We literally overnight went, I think it was from 23% to 12% or 13%. We just bang like that. Why? Because, of course, I get, there are people who basically may have voted for the Liberal Democrats as, I don't know, almost a left-wing alternative for Labour. I heard Tony Blair say this on the radio the other day. I don't normally agree with him, but I actually thought on this he was absolutely dead right. He said, look, the issue for the Liberal Democrats is that they went into coalition with a party, and a lot of their supporters that traditionally supported them don't like that. Of course I get that. I wish I was Prime Minister. I wish I'd won the election. I didn't. We came third, and no one got a majority. And all I would say is, like, the very worst thing for the values that I believe in, and many of our supporters believe in, the kind of things we talked about here, reform, the environment, fairness, better pensions and all the rest of it, is if we back in 2010 said, oh no, it's all too difficult, it's all too controversial, we're just going to we're going to just cower in a corner and just throw stones at other people because we never want to get our hands dirty with power. I actually think the long run would have been, the message would have been, do you know what? The Lib Dems are only good for opposition. That's the only place where Lib Dems can thrive, and I just don't accept that. So yeah, I accept that being coalition and then doing all the difficult things to fix the economy has created a lot of controversy, but I have an old-fashioned belief that if in the long run you do the right thing for the country and you stick to your guns in terms of your values, people will come to at least, perhaps not like you, but at least respect you for doing what you're trying to do. OK, a couple more emails we've just got time for. Naomi in Kent. As it's revealed that British women's feet are getting bigger and bigger, does Mr Clegg know what size shoe his wife takes? They are elegant and dainty and perfect. What size shoe? I was hoping to. I can't. I don't exactly know Miriam's shoe size. Don't know your wife's shoe size? No. Well, I try and buy many things for Miriam, but I've never yet ventured to buy shoes for her. It's a very personal thing, isn't it? Yeah. Aaron in Walthamstow. We've heard this morning police forces have failed to uphold any complaints against racism. Does Nick Clegg think the police are still institutionally racist? I stress the word "still" there, and stop implying that you ever thought they were. No, I think you're aware of the IPCC. The IPCC, really? Yeah. No. I heard Anna this morning talking about it. Look, I think a lot of progress has been made since the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, but I think it's still obviously some way to travel still. And I think the report from the IPCC does show that there are some quite serious failures to properly grip this. 94 internal investigations, 170 public complaints, West Mids, West Yorks and Greater Manchester. Not one conviction, in single quotes. I know it's not a conviction, but not one upheld. It's extraordinary, isn't it, Nick Clegg? I just take at face value what the IPCC has said, which is that they feel that there hasn't been enough rigour in these investigations. And I think... I'm sure, in fact I know, certainly all the senior police officers that I know believe that it's absolutely their duty to take these things seriously. What I can't do, I can't comment on individual cases and whether there should have been prosecutions or not. But I think the police, I'm sure they'll do this. I'm sure they'll do this, particularly in those forces which were identified by the IPCC, will ask themselves very searching questions about how to improve their inquiries when very serious allegations like this arise. All right, and we finish with a celebrity call. Jamie Oliver.
I would love to extend to Nick, is he prepared in his unique position to personally stand up, not professionally, but personally stand up and say he's truly committed to reducing childhood obesity by 5% in 5 years? Could he possibly get others, within the government to do the same? Because I think to do anything less would be morally wrong.
Jamie Oliver talking on Food Revolution Day. This is an idea to try and bring about a revolution in particularly children's eating habits. Nick Clegg.
Well, what I'd say to Jamie is, and I'd love to talk to him about this one day, is that I think one of the biggest things that we're going to do in the coming months to really try and improve things for children is by providing free school meals to all little kids in the first 3 years at school. The evidence, and Jamie will know this, is overwhelming, is that we've got far too many kids who are poor but not receiving free school meals, who are turning up at school with a can of something and a slice of white bread with some chocolate and a paste on it, and they're failing to concentrate in the afternoon. It's their education is suffering, and their health is suffering as well, and they are often then on the early steps towards obesity. I am so proud. I know there's endless condemnation from the Daily Mail and all the rest of them from the right wing, saying that somehow we shouldn't be trying to improve the healthy meals that little kids receive at school. I think it'll prove to be one of the best achievements in order to address precisely what Jamie's been campaigning on. Whether it's 5%, whether it's 7%, look, I can't pluck a percentage out of the thin air. Maybe we should go more than 5%. All I do know is, again, trying to be practical, what I can do about it is try and ensure that this new radical policy, starting in the autumn, despite all the cynicism, scepticism about it, is as fully and properly delivered from this autumn as possible, because I think that will really help deal with child obesity in the long run. Enjoy your pint this afternoon with Vince Cable. Nick Clegg, as ever, thank you. Call Clegg with Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg here on LBC, where news is next.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Aziz. Nick Clegg has told LBC the reported row between Home Secretary Theresa May and Education Secretary